The Fancounters Celebrity Podcast, number 169. Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast.
You were like the carrot top of interviewers.
Wow, how disappointing was that question?
You did not just ask me that.
Well, that's a big question.
Never mind, I'm done. I'm not doing the show.
Wow, I can't believe it.
I'm telling you, I'm hooked.
Nick.
Yeah, he's still awesome. He's still a good friend of mine.
Welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. My name's Nick.
And I'm Tracy.
Thank you so much for joining us for another great episode of the show. And this one won't disappoint. We've got a guest who brought his A-list material on his A-list friends.
And he's got a lot of them.
Yeah, very good story. So before we get into the show, if you are listening to this show on your favorite podcasting app, just know that you can go to YouTube and watch us do the show and dust our microphone stands live on the stream. There we go. It's dusty down here. I don't know what all this dust comes from in this studio. Anyway, we are on Instagram as well, at Fancounters Live. And I did mention the YouTube channel, which is Fancounters Podcast. Please hit subscribe when you visit over there, because that helps us out a lot. There's not a lot of ways you can help the podcast except telling your friends, which you've done a lot of over the last few months, I can see. But subscribing to that YouTube channel will be a big deal for us.
Absolutely.
Now, on today's show, we have a guest named Marc Sheffler. And Marc is a writer and actor. You would know him best for his role in The Last House on the Left. And he's done a lot more than that, though. He is a writer for sitcoms like Who's the Boss?, Charles in Charge. I even forgot, doggone it, I forgot to ask him about Harry and the Hendersons.
Oh, yeah.
He brought up Steven Spielberg, who created that show, and I never went there. Doggone it. He was also a writer for Sister Sister and the Happy Days reunion special.
Happy Days. Oh my gosh, dude. I've never missed a Happy Days episode.
Really?
I've watched every single one of them.
Did you watch the reunion special?
I did.
Oh, okay.
And what's really cool is when I was a kid, back in the day when we had tape recorders, not, the fancy stuff we got now, I got a big tape recorder for my birthday.
Yeah.
And that morning when I opened it up, there happened to be an episode of Happy Days coming on. And the first thing I did was I put it in front of the television set, hit record, and I recorded the entire episode of Happy Days.
Did you ever listen to it?
Absolutely.
When you're laying in bed at night.
You are not going to believe what episode it was.
No, I won't.
It was the episode when Ralph Malph ran over Fonzie's motorcycle.
Sweet.
It was a great episode. And
I've really never seen Happy Days. I mean, I have. I've seen portions of episodes, but that's another story. So anyway, Marc Sheffler's here, and he's got some great stories about all of his writing credits and other things as well. So it's a really fast-paced hour. Now, I will tell you, this one is not for the kiddos. There's some language in here, and it was a lot, so it was a lot to edit out. So this one does have an E. It's our first E rating on Apple Podcasts, but so just maybe if you're an adult, you can listen to it, and if you're a kid, let's have you go to the next one.
Yeah, and the parents can be prepared,
Yeah. So anyway, here he is, Marc Sheffler on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. Marc Sheffler, welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. Thank you so much, sir, for being here.
Thank you guys for having me.
You bet. Now, we spoke a couple months ago when our friend Steve Joyner kind of set this whole interview up, and I'm really glad he did. But you said something to me on that conversation that kind of stuck with me. I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on it. You had said you were living like a teen with a really big allowance. And
that's from the time I was a kid. That was my goal.
But is that because your parents were wealthy and you were living off them, or because of your career?
When I was a kid, I realized, although I didn't maybe intellectualize it to myself, I realized that I wasn't one of those people who was a 9-to-5 go to work and kind of person, those 40-hour. I nothing wrong with that. That's the backbone of our country.
Right.
But there are strange people floating around them like me who kind of are outside of that mindset. But I also knew that as an adult, I'd have financial responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So I kind of quantified my natural immaturity, because I am 71 years old and those people who know me are still asking me what I'm going to be when I grow up. So I just don't. I never really matured. Like when I turned 65, I looked at myself in the mirror and I just shook my head and I said, "This is it, man. It ain't getting better than this. You are as mature as you're ever going to get."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm still a guy who like thinks about lighting farts. So, you know, and I'm 71. So it's pretty strange. So I realized that, you know, I have to find some world where I can exist as who I knew I was and still live well. So when I was like 15 or 16, you asked if my parents were wealthy. My dad was an aluminum siding salesman who did very well.
Okay.
So and he loved me and was very supportive and very close to me. And he basically, I wouldn't say spoiled me, because I do have a concept of you know, not overdoing it, but he took really good care of me. Like I got my first custom made pair of pants when I was 8 years old or 10 years old, or some ridiculous young age. So I always wanted to live, like I grew up, you know, I had charge accounts in restaurants and I was raised by, my dad was single for a long period of time when we were together. So he was this fast talking, very slick, big fancy Cadillac driving, silk mohair suit wearing aluminum siding salesman who I would watch go into homes and sell people work and just take thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars from them, deliver the work. He wasn't a crook or anything, but you know, he built in quite a nice profit. So I said, yeah, and that's the way to live. So I kind of got used to that life, that, you know, taking my clothes to the cleaners and going out and tipping and signing, and that I got used to that real as a kid.
It's easy to get used to.
I didn't want to give it up. So this is it. This is the life. But there's another reason why I am. You know, it's funny. Every time I do an interview, I always think in the back of my head, "You're talking too much, man. You're talking." And then another part says, "No, this interview is with you, you idiot.
It's for you."
So
yeah.
So when I was 10 years old, this goes back to what I was saying about my father indulging me. When I was 10 years old, the run up to my birthday, my dad said to me, "What do you want for your birthday?" So I said, I don't know, the Three Stooges.
Yeah.
And he got them for me. He hired them to perform at a private birthday party. They were doing I grew up in Pittsburgh, and used to be a nightclub there called the Holiday House.
Okay.
So they were doing a 2-week gig there, and my dad hired them to perform at a private birthday party that he rented the nightclub out in Saturday afternoon. I had about 60 of my friends, parents, and, you know, 60 in the audience, I remember. Still have friends today who were there who talk about it with me. And in the middle of the show, the Mo announces that this is, you know, we all know it's a birthday party, and let's have the birthday boy come up on stage. So I went up on stage with them, and I knew all their material because I was a manic Three Stooges fan.
Right.
And so I started to interact with them, and it took Mo kind of by surprise that I was like so fluid, right? I was like right in the moment. So my friends and their parents were laughing, and I couldn't see shit because the lights were in my eyes. But I remember that feeling. I remember that feeling of I'm up on a stage, I'm talking, I'm moving around with the Three Stooges, I'm getting laughed, and that laughter came back to me like this warm comforter, you know, like this blanket that just wrapped me up. And I thought to myself, you know, I think this is what I'm going to do, because that's it didn't get any better than that. You know, it's like, you know, there's a thing that heroin junkies talk about that after the first time they use heroin, they're always chasing that, you know, chasing the dragon thing. They're always chasing that first moment. Well, that's what it's been like. It's like, I'm always chasing that embrace, that thing that I felt. So, you know, that's my thing, man. That's what drives me.
That's really funny. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that was our question too. You answered the how, but my second question was going to be how much? Like, how much did your dad have to pay them to do that?
I think he paid them $1,500. Wow. If I remember. That's the number that I don't know for sure, but remember it's in like 1959.
Right.
So
which is way more money.
It's like $25,000 today or something. So, that's what I think it was.
Can you imagine having the Three Stooges perform at your birthday party? That's like cool as heck.
This is why I grew up. This is why I am the way I am, because that happened.
Wow. That's incredible. So, okay, it was The Last House on the Left, the movie that has since been remade that launched your interest and career in the entertainment business. It was that small budget film that got you feeling like you belong in production and not in front of the camera. Did you not enjoy the experience?
Oh, I loved it. Imagine this. Imagine you're blowing up a balloon, right? And you get it to a nice size, but it wants to expand more. And that's what it was. It wasn't that I didn't love it. I still love it. What I wanted to do was have more of an imprimatur on the story. I wanted to be a storyteller.
Okay.
I wanted to have a greater participation. I loved making that movie. I learned the fundamentals of everything I've ever learned about production. I learned that 4 weeks in Connecticut with Wes and Sean. So I loved it, and I'm grateful and humble that. It's a humbling thing to have made this piece of shit movie 50 years ago or something, like all that time ago.
Yeah.
And it's still here. It's still around. People are still watching it. I still go, you guys brought me on here. I still go to conventions and sign autographs and with long lines.
Yeah.
Would you,
so I'm like blown away by it.
Would you consider it a cult classic type of thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
completely. Yes, and beyond a cult classic, I've gone through a kind of an emotional ride with it. Because first of all, when I'm 21 and I'm doing it, it's just a way to get laid, right?
I love the candid honesty.
Yes.
Oh, it is because it goes back to when I went to college at Louisiana State. I went to school with David Duke.
Oh my gosh.
One of America's great civil rights advocates, right?
Yeah.
So asshole then, asshole now. Man has been changed. And I knew him. I mean, I literally knew him. I used to debate him. So I dropped out of college after 2 years, and I had 3 goals in mind, life goals. I wanted to smoke as much weed as possible. I wanted to sleep with as many different women as possible. And I wanted to make just enough money to afford the weed and the women. there goes there's the thing about I want to live like a teenager with a big allowance.
Got
right?
it. Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I had this emotional roller coaster with Last House with respect to the fans. Like 21, it's about getting laid. It's about, parties and, being recognized and having fun. And when I started, David Hess got me to go. David played my father in the movie, and he got me to start doing conventions and horror film conventions. Mm-hmm. And when you go there, you have to you interact with fans. You talk to them and listen. Yeah. And I was kind of, I don't know, standoffish. I was never really like an asshole about it, but I was kind of like, in my head, I would kind of make fun of people who liked Last House, and because I was young and didn't know any better. But then after I started, kept my mouth shut, I started listening to people and hearing why they were fans of it. I developed, dare I say, more mature appreciation of what the film meant to them. And a common thread, which is one of the reasons why I believe it's still around. It's not that it's a great movie, because by a lot of standards, it's an amateurish movie. However, it is a very prescient cautionary tale. And I can't tell you the number of times where teenage girls have shown up at my table with wanting to get pictures and autographs and saying to me, my father made me watch this movie. My parents made me watch this movie. My dad wanted me to know what happens when people, we make bad decisions in life.
Yeah.
And I started to hear all of these things that I never really factored into my thinking. And it was an eye-opener. It gave me a greater appreciation and greater respect for the fans of Last House, because the fact that it is still around and that it was remade, it shows its cross-generationality, that it just continues to go on because it has some kind of message that transcends any unique time period, and always people want other people to see it for good reason.
What did you think about that 2009 remake versus the one that you guys made?
I didn't think it was anything, and not because for any other reason than I looked at the script, and the script wasn't. I didn't think the script was very good. Plus, it was overproduced for me. One of the reasons I think our Last House was the success it was, that it had this visceral aspect to it. It wasn't overproduced. There was no way Sean and Wes could have overproduced it. They didn't have the money to do it.
Right.
So everything was shot on the day, which means all the effects were done in that moment. It was shot in real time for the most part, except for a couple of time transitions, one at the beginning, and then one at the end, I think. And it was very immediate, right? It was very immediate. It was in your face. And the fact that none of us were known actors. We were all unknown. So when the audience was watching it, not only did Wes create the illusion of a window opening into giving the audience a view into a horrible crime unfolding in real time, okay? It just, nobody knew who we were, so that added to the immediacy of it, because you couldn't look at the movie and say, there's Brad Pitt as Benjamin Button.
Right.
You always, when a name actor does something, and they're brilliant, right? But when somebody who's well known does something, you're always, you're maybe 90% there, but 10%. So it's George Clooney.
Yep.
No matter what,
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you always know who the guy is or who the woman is. But with Last House, it was that timing thing. I was just on the phone. It's funny you talk about this. I was just on. You know who Mark Summers is?
The game show host? Yeah.
Okay.
He and I are best friends. We've been best friends for like forever, since we started at the Comedy Store together.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I told him I was about to do an interview, and he said, comedy or Last House? And I said, I think a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And he said, man, that Last House really did it for you. And we were talking about it and saying, yeah, it's just, it's that immediacy. It's that thing that nobody knew who anybody was.
Yeah.
And that added to the mystique of the movie.
It's funny you said that, though, about what this interview's about, because I listened to a lot of your appearances on other shows, and I didn't want to ask the same question. So we will probably jump around a little bit. I hope that's all right. Okay, good, because I was going to move on to Warner Brothers now. So that's why you're like comedy. I was like, my next question is the fact that we like hearing about all these iconic people that other folks have worked with. And you got to work with Mel Blanc, the voice of so many Warner Brothers characters, when you wrote the show How Bugs Bunny Won the West.
That is correct.
I would love to hear some Mel Blanc stories if you've got anything that pops in.
I don't have any Mel Blanc stories, because I kind of just sat in on some sessions. That was my first, I think that was my first real serious job. I don't know if I'd done it. There were a couple of variety shows that I worked on previous. I'm trying to, I don't have the time frame. It was right around the same time. And it was an experience, because I was probably had the talent, obviously, to do the job, but I was so new. I was shitting in my pants. I had to go to Warner Brothers. No, because when you know that you're basically a fraud, right? And you're just gaming everyone because you don't want to get a real job. You're always on the edge that they're going to find out, that they're going to discover, that you're faking all of this. So I would go to Warner Brothers and I'd go in these meetings with executives, and they would be talking, the way you imagine executives talking in meetings like this. And I'm sitting there and I go, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing, man. I'm going to have to just I'm going to have to just, once again, just fake this. So I'd go and then I had to screen, I don't know, like 100 Bugs Bunny cartoons, because the way we did that show was, and it was a wonderful learning experience, was I had to create the spine of the story and then write live action for the narrator, who ended up being Denver Pyle, a famous cowboy actor, TV and film Western actor, who I did meet when we shot the stuff on the Warner Brothers backlot. And what I had to do was create my own story and then take these cartoons and pull pieces out of them, put them like on a spine, and then write these interstitial pieces that Denver Pyle would do. So even though I was kind of like a brand new, I got a chance to be creative because, you know, I had the first run at proposing which cartoons we were using, and this is the story. And apparently it worked, because Warner Brothers was very happy with what I did, and so was CBS.
Wow.
So
very cool. All right. Well, you had worked on the Brady Brides reunion series. Tell us a little bit about your Brady experience and your time working on that series.
Okay. So that was at Paramount. And what happened, I had an agent, Larry Little, at ICM, and he was best friends with Jeff Benson, who was the #2 guy in Paramount Television at the time. So the Brady thing gets picked up off a movie. They had done a movie that was directed by another guy named Peter Baldwin, and it got very high ratings. So NBC ordered like 12 episodes of a show. So they put Sherwood and Sherwood Schwartz and his son Lloyd on the lot, and I get a call from my agent who says, "You got to do me a favor." And I said, "What?" I said, "Well," and he tells me about this show. He said, "There is nobody funny there, and the network and the studio are going fucking nuts. Would you go to work on this show?" So I didn't care, sure, why not? It paid my bills for quite a while. So I went to work on it, and I met Sherwood Schwartz, who was a very nice man, right?
Yep.
He has this, and one of his kids was another executive producer, Lloyd Schwartz, also a nice guy, right? A big guy, a large man. But when I had to go and have a meeting with him, and when I went into the meeting, Lloyd, I noticed, had a nose this big, right? So
okay.
I know I told you I'm not very mature, and it's not a new thing. So I'm in there, and he's saying, yes, well, these are the stories we're going to do. And NBC's very excited, and starts giving me numbers and ratings and projections and, what they're going to do here and there. And all I'm thinking about is, how the fuck does a guy named Lloyd Schwartz have a nose this big? So, and meeting is about to wrap up. And he said to me, "So what do you think?" I said, "Yeah, it all sounds great." He said, "Got any questions?"
Don't ask that one.
I said, "Yeah, one." He said, "Shoot." I said, "Anything?" He said, "Anything." I said, "How the fuck does a guy named Lloyd Schwartz have a nose this big?" And instead of being offended, he tears up and starts laughing. And he said to me, all of my dad's children, for their 16th birthdays, he gave them nose jobs.
Oh, you're onto something.
Wow.
So, that was an experience that I've had in various iterations several times in my life, which was, I found myself in like the land of iconic, right?
Yeah.
Because the Brady, for whatever reasons, that whole Brady universe, became iconic, and there I was, with Florence Henderson and Marcia, and I mean Maureen McCormick and Eve Plum and the guys, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, it never went anywhere. It went on for like 12 episodes and got shit canned. But, this is why the title of my book, I'm working on a book about my life. And the title of my book is As Luck Would Have It, and then subtitled the story of me and my very successful mediocre career.
Nice.
And because that's what it's been.
Yeah.
But in show business, you can have a mediocre career and do really well.
As you've done.
Yes.
As you've done.
So, life's good.
So Brady kids, any stories? I know I call them kids. They're adults, but nothing really hit you.
Yeah, it was a fun experience, but it kind of ran by the numbers. Everybody knew how to make a show. I mean, everybody behaved themselves. There were no assholes. It was, a lot of stories you hear about nonsense
Well, we hear about drug use on the Brady Bunch stuff. We talked to a writer of the Variety Hour, and they talked about that a little bit.
I did get in trouble once. Trouble. My agent called me and said, "Don't say this anymore." At the writers' table, I did that cocaine joke off, having nothing to do with the story.
Yeah,
we were working on. I did a cocaine joke, and Lloyd and Sherwood were there, and it's one of those moments like when you're on stage and you do a joke, and the people in the front row go,
nobody laughs.
And I knew it. I knew it fell flat, man. I just, but I didn't think it was gonna rise to the level of I had to get a call from my agent. I don't know. And the reason was apparently one of the Brady cast, one of the girls, had a drug problem.
Yeah, we
know.
know.
They wanted to make sure that I wasn't going around like spouting off about shit like that. And I laughed at it at the time because it didn't seem like anything to me, but who knows?
Well, Mark, you have your way of working your way into iconic shows and casts. You mentioned that. But the other one's Happy Days. You did their reunion special. How weird is it to kind of be around the Cunninghams and all those real classic television characters? I mean, some of these things just have to be really surreal, where you walk in and you're like, am I really here?
Oh, I've had more of those moments. I'll tell you about some other ones, but I've had more of those moments than you could absolutely believe. So the Happy Days show, I knew Scott Baio from Charles in Charge.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't like starstruck. In fact, I've always been the opposite of starstruck.
Okay.
Doesn't mean anything to me. But taking a half a step back from that to be in the room with the entire cast, and then because I had to watch Sam, my partner at the time was Sam Denoff, writing producing partner. I watched every episode of Happy Days, and Sam was older than me, and he was the contemporary and good friend of Gary Marshall's. So I'd known Gary before through Sam, and we watched every episode of Happy Days. And before we started writing, we had individual meetings with everybody. Went to Imagine and met with Ronnie Howard. But Sam knew Ronnie from when he was a kid, so they were friends. And I'd met Brian Grazer quite a few times. I knew Brian, and Ron's partner. Okay. And I had known Ron casually, but I knew Brian. So we all kind of knew it. And then, I go to meet with Henry Winkler, who ended up being the host, and would hang out with Pat Morita at his house in Santa Monica. And I was friends with Donnie Most, so I knew Donnie, right, already. And then Anson and the other people, and Mr. and Mrs. Cunningham. They were really a wonderful group of people. I'd not be, loath to say anything else and full of shit if I started telling shit about them. Erin Moran gave us a little bit of trouble. She didn't want to do the show. Scott Baio's dad tried to get more money for Scott than, because we had, you guys know what Favored Nations deal is? Favored Nations means that everybody gets paid the same.
Oh, okay.
So if you're, a show like that, you make Favored Nations deals so that everybody's equal. So I think we were paying $10,000 to everybody. So Mario, Scott's dad, tried to get more money, and ultimately, it worked. Oh, wow. It was okay. So, yeah, and it was just a wonderful experience. Henry Winkler, I don't know if you know if you've ever heard this. Henry Winkler is probably the nicest guy in show business.
All the time we hear that. Yeah.
100% true. Literally 100% true. He is the kindest, nicest, friendliest. He's like an anti-star, right? He's just exactly the opposite of what you would think someone as successful as he is would be. You know, he is completely the nicest guy. So working with Henry was wonderful.
Well, you know, Mark, I don't want to interrupt your thought, but we've got a statue of Henry Winkler in Milwaukee.
Nice.
There'd be a reason to come here.
The bronze,
the
bronze Fonz, it's called.
Bronze Fonz.
Yeah. So, you know, that was an experience. The fact that I was partners, you guys know who Sam Dunoff was? Do you know who he was?
No.
Okay. No, it's okay. I don't, that's why I asked. When I was a kid and just, you know, working on where I was going in my life, by the time I hit my teens, I knew that the entertainment business, it was definitely the entertainment business, right? So I was a religious follower of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I watched a lot of reruns of that with my dad, so.
Okay. So I found myself really liking episodes of the Dick Van Dyke Show that were written by a team called Bill Persky and Sam Dunoff.
Okay.
So I watched a lot of their stuff. Bill and Sam went on to create That Girl for Marlo Thomas.
Oh, okay.
And they were in on that whole Danny Thomas, Sheldon Leonard.
Okay.
They always worked on those shows. They were like woven in there. Carl Reiner was part of that, and Sam and Carl were close, and Sam was managed by Carl's nephew, George Shapiro, who manages Jerry Seinfeld. So this is a weird business, but everybody's really connected, right? Everybody's intertwined. So I kept, you know, watching, and I knew that this guy, Sam Dunoff, and I never forgot that name. So cut to years later, I had started my career and had gotten some recognition from NBC and got friendly with the executives over there and was doing a lot of work on NBC shows. And I got a call from Stu Sheslow, who was the senior vice president of comedy at the time. And he said to me that he just got a call from Brandon Tartikoff, former president of NBC, brilliant executive, who wants to introduce you to somebody because he thinks you two guys would work really well together. Uh-huh. And I said, who? And he said, Sam Dunoff. So I literally, my jaw dropped. And Stuart kept saying, hey, you there? You there? I said, yeah. I said, yeah, set the meeting. I'm in. Yeah. I just hung the phone up and I said, what the fuck, man? So I go to meet Sam and we hit it off. And I was doing something and he was doing something and things happened. We didn't get together for a couple of 3 years or so, but then we became partners. And there were times in that experience when I was just in places with him because of him, for the most part, that I just couldn't fucking believe that I was there. There was at the Museum of Television and Radio here, one night they did a retrospective on all the Danny Thomas, Sheldon Leonard shows.
Okay.
Right, that whole era of shows, and which, you know, includes like Andy of Mayberry and, you know, that genre and That Girl and whatever. So after the event, I got invited, because I was with Sam, to a private dinner at Chasen's, a restaurant called Chasen's in Beverly Hills. And I'm literally the only person in the room I don't know. Okay. It's like, it's Marlo Thomas and Susan Harris and Tony Thomas and Sheldon Leonard and Danny and Danny's wife and Sheldon's wife and Sam. It was like, 12, 15 people.
Wow.
And it was like amazing. It was just, and I've had a lot of those moments where, I worked on the People's Choice Awards one year, a couple of years actually. And my first wife went with me to the show, and Anthony Hopkins was on the show. So she said to me, if there's any way in the world you can get me a picture or just an autograph or something of Anthony Hopkins, I would just just be amazed. And I said, oh, okay, sure. So in the backstage, there's a green room. You guys know like what a green room is, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So this one was like a high-end green room. It was like, like a fancy restaurant with, tables and chairs and actors and everybody. It was like Spielberg was there and
Wow.
Carol Burnett. And I knew Carol. So I'm standing at the bar back there and I'm talking, and Steven is here and Carol Burnett and Michael Douglas, and we're just kind of hanging out. And I see Hopkins come in, and he's with an usher, and the usher points to me, and he comes over and he says, how'd you do? Tony Hopkins, how'd you do? And he said, you must be Mark. And I said, yes. And he said, they're supposed to see you. And I said, okay. So we talked about, what he's supposed to do and whatever. And I said, I have a weird thing to ask you, and you could say no, and I'm okay with it. So he said, sure, go ahead. I said, my wife's out in the car, my wife's out in the room, and she's a huge fan. Is there any way that I could get you to just sign something to Jan? And he says, oh, I have a much better idea. Why don't you just go and get it and bring it back?
Wow. Nice guy.
So I go out to the table, and Jan is sitting there. And I said, listen, you got to come with me. I got a problem. And she said, what? I said, I can't tell you, but it's like serious shit. You just do me a favor. Just trust me. I said, I need your help. She said, hey, what can I do? I said, look, just got to come with me. So she says, yeah, sure, anything. So she gets up, and I take her, and I walk into the green room with her, and she's like this. She sees who's in the room, right?
Yeah.
And then she sees Hopkins at the bar standing next to Spielberg, and they're talking, right? So I go over, and I take her by the hand, and now, it's like her hands is like this. She doesn't want to go, right? She's scared. So I said, no, just come on. So I said, you want an autograph? I got you better. Yeah. So I go over there, and it's like Steven is here, I'm here, my ex-wife is here, and Hopkins is here. So I introduce Jan to Tony Hopkins. He just, how'd you do, Tony Hopkins, does that thing. And she's like, like that. And, he signed something to her, and I walk out with her. I take her out, and I take her back to the seat, and she's like grateful. And I come back, and I go back into the room, and Spielberg looks at me and says, hey, what am I, chopped liver?
Right. Probably the only time he'll have been looked over.
He was messing with me. He said, you bring your wife in here. She says hello to Hopkins. You can't introduce her to me. I said, she didn't ask to meet you, just Hopkins. And so, that's a moment that kind of sticks in my head.
That's amazing. That's a great story.
That is.
You mentioned Charles in Charge. One of the questions that we both kind of thought of on our notes, so I'm making sure we stick it in here, is that you did just like a small set of episodes. So, I mean, I always thought sitcoms had teams of writers that maybe only changed season to season, but you just came in for, not a whole season. So.
I worked on Charles in Charge with, my writing partner at the time was Lee Aronson, who went on to co-create 2.5 Men with Chuck Lorre.
Okay.
So what happened was we had a deal. We wrote one episode of Charles in Charge that they liked before we were on staff. Then we wrote another one, and after we wrote the second one, they invited us to come to work on the show. So the way it works is in most shows that there's a staff of writers, and in addition to the daily work that staff writers do, like everybody who has titles like this: executive producer, co-executive producer, supervising producer, producer, co-producer, executive story editor, staff writer. Every one of those people I just named is a writer on the show.
Okay.
When you see the credit produced by, that's the line producer who does the nuts and bolts of the show. But those other credits are negotiated credits, and each one that sounds more important than the preceding one is because that person gets more money. So that's just the ladder that is. So I was working as an executive story editor. Lee and I were partners on Charles in Charge, and we were there. We wrote 10 episodes together and worked on the show for about 6 months. And the reason we left was we were offered from Sony in the middle of our contract at Universal. Sony, we had done a couple of Who's the Boss episodes.
Yep.
And they liked, we did one that was really pivotal that got us the job at in that I'm about to tell you about. But we wrote the episode that explains James Coco's death. James Coco played Tony's father-in-law, Nick, and who was very close to Alyssa Milano's character, Samantha. And like, I think they were on hiatus or something, or they were in like day one, and Coco has a heart attack and dies. So they needed an episode written to explain his death. So our manager at the time, Steve Sauer, managed Tony Danza, which is the way we got in there. So they asked us to write that episode. So we wrote that episode, and Sony liked that episode so much that they asked us to go to New York and be two of the writing producers on a show that they'd gotten on the air at CBS, starring a young, amazing talent by the name of Jason Alexander. and the title of this show was Everything's Relative, and it was in New York. I think it was 86, 87, something like that. And Lee and I flew to New York and just had the greatest time for 3.5 months till that show got canceled. And
mediocre career. Yes, we got it.
Yes, but there I was, riding in limos, flying on first class, making a huge amount of money. So, you know, it is what it is,
Not
man.
Too bad.
So, you know, that's the connection there. That's the reason why, to answer your question, that's why we stayed on Charles in Charge only about 6 months, because we were offered. And the executive at Universal who let us out of the deal was then the senior vice president of comedy at Universal, Gary Hart, who is today still one of my best friends. And he was for 12 years the president of Paramount Network Television, which is why I worked at Paramount quite a bit back in those days.
Everybody's interconnected, like you said. You never know who anybody else knows, so you better not tick them off.
Yes.
It's like the 6 degrees of separation thing, right?
That is 100% true. That I played the Kevin Bacon game with a zillion people, and nobody can. I'm no more than 6 degrees away from anybody in this business, and more often than not, no more than 2 or 3 degrees. You know, and anyone who's had a real career, like an actual career, falls into that category. That you're really no more than 6 degrees away from anyone.
That means we're in that.
You're now
we're
part
now
of
in
that.
whole loop now.
You're
with
now
you.
in
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk about a current project that you've got going on. It's an interesting title. It's called I Filmed Your Death. And I thought it was interesting.
That's been attributed to me, but I don't know anything about it.
Oh, well, there goes my Peter Tork of the Monkees question. We'll just chop that out.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I've heard that a couple of times. I don't know what that is.
IMDb is not always accurate, but when we're Googling around everywhere, we're just trying to find little nuggets.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for understanding. Let's go on to the next one, which I can do. So, Mark, I know you've done autograph shows and appearances. We talked about that kind of at the top of the show. When you meet a fan, you kind of talked about like the Last House on the Left interactions and what those are like for you. Do people talk about anything else, or do you have any favorite fan stories?
Let's see. I don't know if I have a favorite. Oh, I have one that I did a place called Texas Frightmare Weekend a few years ago, and an excellent show. And one of those shows that if you're a talent, if you're like a guest and talent there, they first class treatment. Just the people who run that, Lloyd and Sue. Kudos to them for making people feel very warm and comfortable. So I was sitting at my table there, and I see a guy, I want to say late 30s, early 40s, with a young girl, clearly his daughter, because they looked, family resemblance.
Okay.
And they're not in line. They're just kind of lingering. So it kind of eased up a bit. And the guy walked over to the table, and I said, can I help you? Can I get you something? And he said, I just wanted to talk to you for a second. I said, sure. And he tells me a story that he's just recently out of the Army, and that he did 2 tours in Afghanistan.
Wow.
And said to me, without going into detail that would violate, national security, I was on some pretty sticky missions. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, and we did some really weird shit. I said, okay. Looking around.
Why are you telling me this?
Yeah, why are you telling me this? Right. I looked around to see if he was carrying anything. So he said, what we would do is we would go out on these missions, and sometimes we'd be out for, a few days at a time, and we'd come back, and in order to decompress, a lot of us would watch movies because it would just take us into another world, like almost instantly.
Yeah.
And he said, in one of the movies that was really, really popular was Last House. And I said, really? Why is that? He said, because we got a chance to watch people doing worse shit than we were doing. And
True.
And he said it kind of really took the air out of everything for me. It just calmed me down, and I just wanted to thank you. And when people when somebody thanks you for something like that, it's a weird thing. I of course, shook hands with him and gave him. I didn't charge him for anything. He was a veteran. I just gave him whatever he wanted.
Nice.
And you don't know how to respond to that, because I didn't really have anything to do with what he's reacting to.
Right.
I was a guy, hired to play a part and told what to do by somebody. So I other than what I did on my own internally when I was on camera, that's what I guess I couldn't really take credit for it. And here he was, thanking me and whatever. And I said, I was just a small part of that movie. I wasn't the creative force behind it. But I accept what you're saying. And on behalf of all of us who made this movie, I'm appreciative of what you said. I've had some weird fans do weird shit in elevators. Because you have you take the same elevators as everybody else, and my current wife, when she started to go along with me, she didn't believe what I told her. The first time she went, I told her what it was going to be like, and she didn't believe me. Right? She thought it was like, because she knew me as me. She didn't know me as the actor who plays Junior. So we get into an elevator going down at the Chiller convention in New York, in New Jersey, actually. And we're going down the elevator, and the elevator stops at a floor, and a young girl, 21, 22, and her boyfriend get on, and she sees me, and she just turns her head like this. But her eyes are like this. Right? She's looking. And then she whispers, I know who you are. And I said, who am I? I've been wondering for years. And she said, you're that guy from Last House. And I said, yes. And she said, oh my God, I'm in an elevator with that guy from Last House. My wife is like shaking her head because what is this? So I explained to her, I said, these celebrities have an odd effect on people. They can get loud people to shut up. They can get quiet people to start talking. It's weird. It's like, so most of the things that have happened are in reference to that kind of celebrity fan dynamic. And I never am rude to people. I'm always, because I'm the guy who just wanted to smoke a lot of weed and hump a lot of women. So, everything, I've greatly exceeded my own expectations. This is all gravy for me, So I don't duel with the universe. I'm always very nice to people. I don't want any nonsense.
That's awesome.
That's good.
Tell me about, I'm always fascinated, just our tagline, the real side of celebrity. What is it like? You mentioned your son who's flying an airplane in the house and causing a lot of noise.
No, I'm kidding. It's kidding. Yes.
Oh.
That was a joke.
Okay.
I was trying to weakly cover the noise.
The noise, whatever it was. Okay, well, whatever it was. I want to just ask, your son obviously sees you as dad. He doesn't see you.
I have 3 children, and all 3 of them.
Yeah, but so aren't they fascinated a little bit with the amount of celebrity you've dealt with in your life?
Yeah, they are. They kind of laugh at it because, as you just said, I'm just dad. And I believe from every all the people I've met who've been in either side of that, like I was pals with Sage Stallone, Sylvester Stallone's son, who passed away.
Right.
And he and Sly, they're just father and son. I've heard phone messages that were on Sage's machine that were Sylvester, right? And it was, hey, Sage, Dad, how you doing? You need anything? Everything okay? Give me a call when you can. That's it.
Yeah.
It's, so, but with my kids, first of all, I didn't let any of them watch Last House until they were, in their teens, although I know that they did it, right? They saw it. They kind of get a kick out of it. My daughter more than anyone, than my son. I have 2 sons and a daughter. My daughter more than my sons. So she's always on Facebook talking to people about me. Yeah, that's my dad, and yeah, he's really my dad. So you can't be a celebrity with your children. You have to be a parent.
Yeah.
That you can't ever have your children look at you like you're like the same way a fan does. That's just bad. That would just be the most toxic parenting imaginable.
Yeah. It's kind of good feeling though when they're bragging about you, right?
It is. It's yeah. But at the same time, it's well, I don't know. I guess you're right. I guess it's a good feeling when they're bragging about you.
Very cool.
That's a good way to end. Do you have anything coming up that you want to promote or tell us about?
Well, I'd gone back to, before the pandemic started, I'd gone back to doing stand-up. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm what's known as an original paid regular at the Comedy Store.
I did read about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm part of that very famous class of 1977 that included
your name's
David
on the wall.
Yes, names on the wall. Original name on the wall. With Robin Williams and David Letterman. So I was in a bad accident. I got hit by a car in 2015 and decided that I wanted to go back and do stand-up because when I was in pain and on this medication, that's all I would think about were those days of that. And I've got a TV show that I've written a pilot for that my manager and my friend Gary Hart, who I'm in business with, are out trying to put together based on my life with my father, my aluminum siding salesman father, starting at about 14 and ending when Last House opens up. When I was 14, if we have time, I'll tell you.
Please, go ahead. Yeah.
So my dad's cousin was the general manager for the Stanley Warner Theater chain in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, kind of like a tri-state area.
Okay.
And his office was at a theater called the Stanley in downtown Pittsburgh, which is one of those grand, ornate, Baroque, kind of gargoyle-y, statuesque theaters, like the kind that they used to have live performances in and then transition to cinema. And we used to go for free and hang out there and whatever. And I used to tell my dad when I was a kid that one of these days I'm going to be in a movie that is on this screen. And my dad, being an aluminum siding salesman, the guys who, make a living out of like nothing, said, yeah, sure. You want it? You can get it. So this TV project, it's kind of like a gritty urban wonder years, coming of age story.
Yeah.
And it's the 7 years between me making that declarative statement, at some point in an episode about something else to my dad. And when Last House opened up in Pittsburgh 7 years later, it opened at the Stanley.
Wow, that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's that beginning moment to my dad and I riding to the opening night in a limo, because they had sent me there to do. They knew I was from Pittsburgh, so they sent me there to do a bunch of press. So the show, those are the two bookends of the show, and the body of the show is everything that happened in between on the road to that moment.
Oh, neat.
That's a cool idea.
So yeah, and it's just first episode came out really, really well. I was very happy with it. Been working on it for a while, and it looks pretty good. It moves along, and it's funny, and it's real. And so, we're out trying to do that.
Cool.
And other than that, I moved last month from LA to Indio, California. My wife and I bought a house out in the desert where it's beautiful and nice and quiet. And I just sit here and write shit and write jokes every day. And when the pandemic's over, I'm going to go back to the stage.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and hopefully write the rest of that series.
Write the rest of the series.
I mean, with so many streaming platforms and your reputation and your career, looking forward to that. Does it have a working title or no?
I just call it the Untitled Pittsburgh Show right now.
Okay.
I don't have a title for it.
That's all right. It'll come. Great. Marc, thank you so much for joining us on this show.
Thank you guys.
This was awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Gave me something to take a shower for.
Well, we should feel honored that he took a shower for us,
then, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I did. I actually put on clean stuff, and
you look great.
Had a reason to do stuff.
And he had pants on, because when he stood up, he had pants on.
That's true.
What's that?
I said you had pants on because when you stood up, you had.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
The last time we did podcasts, I did have my Christmas pajama pants on because I never stood up. Nobody knew.
Yeah, I did a Zoom comedy show. I've done a few of them, but one of the ones I did, I didn't have any pants on, and I wanted to get up in the middle. Have you ever seen those shows? They're
no.
Like, I've done a few of them, and I only do them if I know the host, because they're like boring as to me. Because it's like being on Hollywood Squares, only without Paul Lynde or Waylon Flowers and Madam.
Nobody to feed off of.
It's just it's what it looks like. It's like Hollywood Squares.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of millennial comedians who are, really nice people, always in search of a punchline. So.
Got it.
Well, thanks again. It was great talking to you.
No, thank you. Guys are great, man. I'm sorry if I got a little windy, but I am my own favorite subject.
No,
I loved your stories, and you've worked on all the shows that I've seen. So this was an interview that was meant to be.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Our thanks to Marc Sheffler for joining us on the show this week. That was a great interview.
Yeah, he had some great stories. Holy
I
mackerel.
have to say, it was probably one of my favorite because it was kind of that behind-the-scenes look that you don't always get. He went into more detail than a lot of guests do.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of experiences with so many names, like
Scott Baio,
Anthony Hopkins.
Oh yeah, and the Steven Spielberg show.
Yeah.
Yep, and the Henry Winkler story. Those are all good. So anyway, we have another celebrity guest coming up next week on the show, and we want you to come back. If you haven't already, hit subscribe on YouTube. That's the one way you can help us out. We'd really appreciate it. And every Friday, a brand new episode drops. So we're not going to tell you who's coming up next week, but I can guarantee you won't want to miss it. So come on back.
See ya.
Bye.